So, hello my sweeties. This is going to be the first time I've recorded in my new space since I've redid it, so I just realized that. So today I wanted to basically react with you guys to a video I came across on Facebook a couple of weeks ago, actually. But at that time I was going through a complete mental breakdown, and so I didn't think that doing a video on this type of topic was going to be best for me, especially in that mental health space. And so I thought, I'll took note of it, put it off to the side, decide I'll react to it later. So I have watched it at least once through, so this is going to be kind of like a reminder warm up to myself. But it's also kind of the first time I'm going to be testing out doing this split screen thing, so I don't know. I'm not going to promise that it's doing well. This is kind of my first time doing it like this, so hopefully this works. But I wanted to do it in split screen so you guys can see my reaction, see my feedback to it. So, without further ado, let's get on to it. Are you also tired of seeing more of this?
You can't be American and wear that mask. You cannot. We literally had a war about this.
You ain't gonna win! My wrist. Down the street, the cops are gonna have his name. Hands up! Don't shoot! Hands up! Don't shoot! You don't need a mask.
Relax.
Man, I can't breathe my face. Just get up.
As I watch the video and listen to the officer's commands, it is my belief that the officer had the intention to deploy their taser, but instead shot Mr. Wright.
No peace! No justice! No... Hold the fist, man. Throw it! Throw it!
And less of this. Let's talk. Bam badam bam 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 badam bam bam bam. Cafe. Bam ba 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 ba. Cafe. Dun 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 dun. Cafe. So the title of the video was been saying this for years, and then in it says, can white people experience racism in America? Which honestly I think that's the captions. I'm going to I don't know if I can take captions off. But basically it has like a split screen like mine and says, watch as a white man explains why white people can not experience racism. And I, as a seemingly white passing person, decided I'm going to react and give my own feedback to this video. So without further ado, let's do that. So first, before we get started on this topic, which I have taken notes, I got some notes on my phone here that I'll be reading from, that I've taken just since watching the video and reflecting on it and deciding to do this video on it. And I have also been working on another video that's kind of about this subject a little bit, but dives a little bit deeper. I've just been having issues with copyright and a couple other things. Did you guys know our former president, his name is copyrighted by our iHeartRadio here on YouTube? Yeah, I can't even say his name, otherwise iHeartRadio comes up and goes ding ding ding, so that's fascinating. And they supposedly stand against hate and stuff, and I can talk about how contradicting that is, but that is not the topic of today. I just thought that was interesting tidbit. So that's kind of one of the challenges I've been having with my other video that I hope will try to get out soon. I am working on it in between some other projects I'm doing for myself and finishing my school. In fact, I'm in my last course for graduation, so yay me. Okay, so do whites experience racism? I, as a white passing person, will say yes. And this is from going to be talking from my own experiences, so I will say this. I am talking from my own experiences as I respond to this person, so this is my opinion, this is from my own experiences, And from my own experiences, yes, white people can experience racism. Is it the same type of racism that blacks, Asians, Mexicans, and any other minority experience? No, but there is a form of racism there. And really for me personally, I think my first real experience with racism was with my ex-mother-in-law. I used to be married to an indigenous person, a fellow indigenous person, and due to the fact that I may be indigenous, but most people don't notice me as indigenous because I am also mixed. Most of the time, I was perceived to have been too white to be with her son. And she would constantly remind me of this the entire time we were together. When we had our first son, he was too white to be her child's child. And basically, because I was also not born on a reservation and was not raised on a reservation, basically his cousin, who was just as white as I am, was better for him than me. So, yeah, whites can experience racism. So I will have to say yes. Another example for me personally, coming from my own personal life, I had lived in government housing at one time. And at this time, it was a government housing that you didn't have to be employed to work there. They were specifically set up for people who were unable to work or just needed a place over their head while they got back on their feet, so to speak, so they weren't on the street. And basically, I had been given 2 apartment options. Both were on the 3rd floor, which for my medical issues was very difficult, but those were my only options beyond going homeless. And so I chose the logical choice of this set of apartments that had an elementary school directly across the street. My oldest at the time was going to be starting 1st grade the following year. And so I figured, even despite my medical issues, I could at least watch my son walk down the stairs and watch him from the window of my apartment and watch him cross the street to school on the days that I was not able to make it down the 3 flights of stairs. So logically, I had chosen that apartment, not realizing I was going to be in an apartment that was mostly made up of Hispanics and indigenous people, aka Native Americans. And though some of my neighbors were nice and everything, basically my experience was, why are you here? You have no right to be here. You, as a white person, should not be in these type of apartments. You guys have too many resources, and basically was told that I was too white to be so poor that I had to be in government housing. Yeah, because apparently whites cannot be poor. And every time the cops would show up or be called on, I was to blame. Oh, it's that white girl upstairs, and basically was told I did not get out of the apartment soon, I would be raped, my dog would be poisoned, my kids would be kidnapped and sold, and it was a huge mess. So when it comes to this question of, do whites experience racism, within my own experiences, yes, whites can experience racism. It can be not as horrific as some of our others have experienced, but I also want to point this out because just the assumption that a race does not experience racism in the same vicinity as you, or cannot experience it at all, is a form of separating us even further. And for us to truly get our world back to where it needs to be, and back to where we are more connected, we do need to acknowledge the fact that everyone can experience racism. So while we watch this video, I want you guys to think of these questions I have for you. Again, I'm going to be reading from my notes, so. Okay, so, as a person of minority, think of how you react when entering a majority of white neighborhood. As a minority, consider how you react when a white family moves into your non-white neighborhood. When the cops are called up, who is it in your neighborhood you automatically assume called them? In my experience, it is always the white person who presumed white person is blamed. So, you know, in my own personal experience, as I said, every time the cops would show up, it was presumed I was the one that called them. Even though you check my phone records, I did not even call 911 once. So, yeah. So, but I do want you guys to think on that and think of just your own assumptions when it comes to people and how you react to people of your same race and of a different race. And even if it's not a white person, even if it's just another person of another race that is different of yours, how do you automatically assume that person is going to react, is going to be? And just keep that in mind as we watch this video. This guy does make some good points. He also makes some questionable points, but we will get into that further on in it's basically a 2-minute video. I also want to state that his experiences and my experiences can be completely different. I actually had a coworker one time explain to one of our supervisors when she was teasing me for my white legs, because I always am in pants, my legs never get tanned, that where she was from, in the very deep south, I would be considered black, and so would she, because we tanned. So wherever you are, not only in the United States, but wherever you are in the world, everyone has a different experience. A person of color can experience different types of experiences, different types of racism, or maybe even the same depending on what country they go to, and the more they travel, the different viewpoints and aspects that they get from different places in the world can reflect on, you know, that area's culture. Even here in the United States, just me traveling, I live in the Four Corners, just me traveling outside of one state and into the other state, the experiences I have changes greatly. So like the experiences I had with my indigenous in-laws, you know, my father-in-law loved me. He saw me as a fellow indigenous, just of a bit different tribe, which I am. My brother-in-law just saw the fact I had lighter eyes, the fact I had lighter skin, and just, nope, she's white. She's a white squaw. End of story. So how people are also raised is also different too. And for me, having come from a mixed area and mixed background, I have also seen the changes within my own community over the years as others from other areas who are not from a mixed background moving into this area and bringing their own mindsets and their own ideas and their own versions of history and how the world perceives certain people has come into place. So he is probably from a different area than I am. But I also like what he is trying to do, is just like what I'm trying to do with my Let's Have Coffee series, which is why now I've dedicated an entire YouTube channel to it, and just trying to get people to think and talk to each other. So I do appreciate that he is trying to at least give some knowledge out there and give some perspectives and everything. So I do appreciate that. So without further ado, I will stop talking and let's watch the video.
Can white people experience racism in America? First, let's understand the word racism. It ends with ism, much like capitalism, the same ism. Communism, the same ism. Socialism, the same ism. So what does that ism mean? Ism means a system put in place by those in power centered around a specific set of ideas. For example, capitalism.
That's not what I wanted to do. Okay, that right there, he does make a lot of good points. I am going to give him a round of applause for that section right there, because that is very important to understand where ism is, and it's, his next point is also going to be really good. That I have to agree with. Yes, the fact that racism ends with ism, along with capitalism and socialism and all this other stuff, is also a way of basically powers trying to stay in power. So racism really comes from people of higher up trying to keep the lower class separated so they can keep their control of, basically their slaves, if you want to keep it that way. It's kind of one of those, when they put millennials against baby boomers, because baby boomers were getting like the door greeting jobs and jobs at like Walmart and stuff, and making it harder and harder for my generation to get jobs because it was being given to the older generation. And so there was a generational war right there, right? A way of separating us instead of getting us to sit down and talk. What does racism do? It divides us so we don't sit there and talk and start realizing these effing assholes up here really need to be taken down a few notches, because if we were not separated, we could easily overthrow them. But instead, they put in racism and convince us that it's our fellow other races, these people who just so happen to be of a different skin color than ours, are to blame for everything. As my mom pointed out to me this morning, Muslims were once considered white until 9/11. So think on that one. So that I have to agree with. I agree with how he started that out. That is a really good point. There may be some points that he and I disagree on, which is part of the reason I am watching this, but that's
ideas. For example, capitalism, a system put in place by those in power centered around capitalist ideas. Communism is a system put in place by those in power centered around communist ideas. Socialism is a system put in place by those in power centered around socialist ideas. So what is racism? It's a system put in place by those in power centered around racist ideas. So then, can white people experience racism? What you're saying is when somebody says to you, cracker, honky, I don't trust white people, colonizer, white devil, that you're experiencing racism. Well, you're not. Let me explain.
I do agree with him on those particular terms that he used. I don't really necessarily consider them racist. I can understand why someone would be offended by being called that. Totally get it. It's kind of like how some people are offended by a tweet of mine a way back that I was tired of being attacked by these lesbians that told me that I was dirty and was filled with STIs because I am bisexual, and apparently a male's genitalia equals automatically that I am dirty, but if I only ever had sex with only women, I apparently am not as dirty, according to them. That's a totally other story. But it's basically, I understand why some people would be offended by my tweet of I am a bisexual lesbian, but I kind of did it in a FU towards these lesbians that were attacking me for just simply being bisexual and attracted to both sexes and having had sex with both sexes. So, but, as I said, that's a completely other story on the same, but I understand why someone would take offense to being called that. So, but is it really racism? Not necessarily. In fact, here, let's do a little Google search right quick. Okay, so Google search. So, ism. See what the Google dictionary says. Okay. Ism, a distinctive practice, system, or philosophy. There we go. A distinctive practice, system, or philosophy, typically a political ideology or an artistic movement who is in my room. Oh, it's American. He loathed ism and any form of dogma. Okay, so we now have a good idea of what ism is. Okay, so white cracker was another one he used, right? Hi. I have to say sling or something. I am recording a video. You are disrupting it. When I have this up, I do not wish to be disturbed, and my bedroom door was closed for a reason. Thank you, my young spawn. Love you. Close the door behind you. Okay. Okay, the secret history of word cracker. Okay, this looks promising. The secret history of the word cracker. As you might have gathered from a blog's title. Okay. Okay, Janelle said that Martin told her that a creepy-ass cracker was following him. She told Don West, George Simmons' attorney, that she didn't think the phrase was racist. West argued. Okay. So, cracker. In 2013, it struck my ears as dated like any, like, offy or hunky. I don't know how to pronounce that word. The kind of slur an old head like Richard Pryor might have uttered. Okay. So could cracker be a regional thing? Okay. Okay, so cracker, the old standby of angle insults, was first noted in the mid-18th century, making it older than the United States itself. It was used to refer to poor whites, particularly those inhabiting the frontier regions of Maryland, Virginia, and Georgia. It is suspected that it was a shortened version of whip crackers, since the manual labor they did involved driving livestock with a whip, not to mention the other brutal arenas where those skills were employed. Over the course of time, it came to represent a person of lower caste or criminal disposition. In some instances, it was used in reference to bandits and other lawless folk. So, let's think on that one then. Okay, so now that we have an idea of the history of cracker, could being called a cracker be considered racist? When you consider the fact that it was used to refer to people who were white, who were poor white, and of a lower class, and normally associated with criminal dispositions and lower classes. So that's one to think about, isn't it? Okay, so what was the other word he used? Let's go back a little bit, because I kind of want to look into that. Okay, honky was another one. Okay. So, honky, sling. Let's see if we can find some history on this. Okay, Urban Dictionary. Okay, so according to Wikipedia, honky, also spelled honky, K-I-E, or sometimes honky, K-E-Y, is a derogatory term directed towards white people, predominantly heard in the United States. Okay, so what does the Urban Dictionary have to say? Okay, so honky, a derogatory term for a Caucasian person, aka white. There are three main theories for the origins of the word. The first is the word originated from the practice of white males wishing to hire African American prostitutes in the 1920s. Oh, wow. And going to the appropriate part of town while honking their car horns to attract the horse. Some versions state that the reason for this was that the white men were too afraid to actually stop in those neighborhoods, so the honking would bring the hookers to them. Others say that since few African Americans could afford cars back in that time, the honking signaled a higher paying white client and would quickly gain the prostitute's attention. I am probably going to get red flagged for reading this. 2. The term comes from the word honky-tonk, which was used as early as 1875 in reference to wild saloons in the Old West. Patrons such as disreputable establishments were referred to as honkies, not intended as a racial slur, but still a disengaging term. Okay, here we go again. Think, people. 3. Honky is a variation of hunky and bull-hunk, derogatory terms for the Hungarian, Bohemian, and Polish immigrant factory workers and hard laborers in the early 1900s. African Americans began to use the word in reference to all whites regardless of specific nation of origin. Again, now we're going to have to think. Okay, so we just realized that cracker could also be considered racist. And now we know honky can also be considered a racial slur. And has been, in fact, used in the past as a racial slur. So, again, here we go thinking. Okay, so what was the other one? Okay, white devil. I've heard this one before. But it wasn't said to me, at least. Okay, this one's Chinese. Okay, Grilil or Gola. Jeez. I'm sorry. Is a common Cantonese slang term for Westerners. Okay, so it comes from China, apparently. Okay. So, white devil. A person who takes advantage of a minority, a thief, often representing the man, an oppressor. This does not apply to the average person of Caucasian descent. Okay, so white devil, we can already go, yeah, no, that's not a racial slur. That just has to do with a part of history when you consider the fact that whites basically went over there and stole Chinese people and put them to work in mines illegally. Okay, so we looked up cracker, we used honky, we looked up white devil. What were the other terms he used?
Honky. I don't trust white people. Colonizer. White devil. That you're experiencing racism. Well, you're not.
Okay. Will you pause and stop going? Okay, colonizer, again, that's also like the white devil slang, is not necessarily racial. It just has to reflect on a part of history. And so when you hear those two particular terms, they could be basically considering you an oppressor. So, yeah. But as we looked up, cracker and honky could actually be considered racial slurs towards white people. So, he's got 50, I got 50. I don't know who's keeping track of points, but, you know, we got to sit here and think about things like this, and we got to, you know, investigate, do some research. I mean, shoot, I just did a quick little Google search. You guys watched me do it. Just quick little Google search, and we were able to see if those were racial or not, or, you know, at least considered at one time in history racial slurs. And so now we can sit there and go, huh, maybe they are. So, here we go. I'm muted.
Well, you're not. Let me explain. What you're experiencing is called prejudice. Prejudice is when someone has an idea about you based purely on the way you look. The reason that's not racism is this. The black community is incarcerated.
Okay. Agree with the prejudice section. I mean, that can go either way, though. As I was saying in the beginning, and when I asked you those questions, how do you guys feel as someone of minority going into a whiter neighborhood? I know for myself, I didn't understand it when I was younger. I'm only recently having to basically come to terms with this and understand it myself, is because I am perceived to be white, I would be safer going into a more white neighborhood and moving into a more white neighborhood than those of, say, my cousin, for example. He would not be able to. He would just be seen as a dirty Indian. So it does make you, consider there is that prejudice. But there is also prejudice on the other side as well. What I experienced when I lived in the apartment complex, what I experienced when I was with my ex-husband. Those are prejudices brought onto me by someone else that ended up becoming more and more racial and ended up turning into racism. So, I'm sorry, there's two sides of the coin, there's two sides of the story, and until we start sitting down and actually thinking about these type of things, we are not going to have any unity.
At a rate 3 times higher than white people for the same crime, are shot by the police at a rate 3 times higher than white people. A traditional black name on a resume will receive a callback 5 times less commonly than a traditional white name. White people are not victims of racial profiling, redlining, gentrification. You see, the system targets.
Again, I have to agree with him on that. With me, it was hard for me to get a job for the longest time. Now that I have worked up a record and, gotten enough experiences, and I do live in a small area that most people do know just about everyone, one horse town, I don't experience it as much, but when we first moved here and when I first started looking for work, yeah, I rarely ever got a call back. Now, could that have been connected to the fact that I have a non-white name? Or could it be connected to the fact that at the time I didn't have any job experiences? It could also be both. I know I have had people basically wait until last minute to call me. I can go months after putting out applications and not have any calls from anyone, even though I have gotten a huge job experience list now. And I do get the second take. When I walk in, people double take because they're not expecting a white person to walk in. Where my ex-husband, on the other hand, did have a traditional white name, except for his last name. So I have a traditional white last name. He had a traditional white first name. And we had considered taking my name. And he probably would have gotten more callbacks when he took my white last name. So, it goes 50-50. Again, totally get where he's coming from. Agree on some parts, disagree on others. He is making a good point. So, I gotta give it to him. He is trying, and I appreciate that he is trying.
Marginalized communities is racism. So even though a white person may experience prejudice, they'll never have to worry about being targeted by the entire system. And that's what racism is. And racism is much worse than prejudice. I hope that clears it up.
Okay, so as I said, he did make some good points. He did make some non-good points. And I understand. I think, honestly, the feeling I kind of got there towards the end was he was basically talking to the Karens and the Chads of the world. Totally get it. Okay, so let's look at prejudice. I am probably not going to spell this right. Okay, prejudice. There we go.
Prejudice.
Okay. Preconceived opinion that is not based on reason or actual experience. Prejudice against people from different backgrounds. Okay, well, here we go. So, did the experience I experienced when I lived in my apartment complex that it was assumed that I was the one calling the cops because I was like one of 2 white people in the entire apartment complex? Was it prejudice or was it racist? Okay, harm or injury that results or may result from some action or judgment. Prejudice resulting from delay in the institution of the proceedings. Well, I know a lot of colored people who are given, they're arrested and either not given bail or given a bail that they purposely know that the person is not going to be able to pay. So is that racist or prejudiced? Give rise to prejudice in someone. Make biased. The statement might be prejudice the jury. Okay? To cause harm to a state of affairs. Delay is likely to prejudice the child's welfare. Those are some interesting last examples, but okay. So, there we go. Okay. So, racism. Okay.
Racism.
Sorry. Prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism directed against a person or people on the basis of their membership in a particular racial or ethnic group, typically one that is a minority or marginalized. Okay, so what he was saying earlier was that the majority of whites experience more prejudice than racism. Okay, I can kind of see where he's getting at there and kind of agree, disagree. But here, it lists prejudice as one of the things of racism. So again, was what I experienced with my in-law and what I experienced at my apartment complex, was that prejudice against me because I was perceived to be white, or was that racial because I was perceived to be white? The belief that different races possess distinct characteristics, abilities, or qualities, especially so far to distinguish them as inferior or superior to one another. Oh, look at that. So, when my neighbors basically told me that I had no right to be in that government housing because I was white and whites aren't allowed to be poor, was that a belief that I possess distinct characteristics, abilities, or qualities based off of the fact that I was of lighter skin and so could not be dealing with some personal difficulties in my own life that required me to be in a government housing that I didn't have to have a job? I mean, I'm just trying to get you guys to think. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. So, wee! Go back to full screen. Okay, so it goes 50-50. I mean, all I'm trying to point out, everyone has their own different experiences. Everyone has their own different stories. Everyone has, their own beliefs, their own standards and everything. So for me personally, I feel like what I experienced with my mother-in-law and in the apartment complex I lived in had more to do with racism than it did being prejudice. Now, what I experience when, say, someone online goes, have you ever experienced racism or things like that, I'm going to assume from their own experiences they have never seen a white person experience racism or understand that what they could be doing could be considered racist. So, everyone has their own stories, everyone has their own 2 cents. It's fine. We're all allowed to have our own opinions, and that's honestly what free speech is about. However, to make assumptions on non-factual beliefs and non-open-mindedness to considering the fact that it can be different in other parts of not only the world, but the same country you live in, can also be different. The fact that I come from a mostly mixed background, my family is mixed, I lived in a mixed area, and so really I didn't understand what racism was until much later on in my life, just because there wasn't much of it around, you know? And it wasn't until basically our area started getting known for money. I hate leaning that direction, but the timing was impeccable that when money started coming in and other people who were from other areas started coming in and bringing their own beliefs in, then yes. And then just my experience of having moved from a basically very mixed area, very mixed background, where people of multiple cultures and languages and religions, etc., races even, lived side by side amongst each other, and we were very neighborly, to then moving just one county over. And I am surrounded by the majority of white people, and the majority of people who are of darker skin are homeless, are on drugs, are the ones that get arrested the most, and are the ones that seem to cause the most havoc according to other people. So just moving one county over was a huge drastic change and had to make me sit back and think and go, what is this? So I can also understand someone from, say, the South compared to me over here in the West. We're going to have different perceptions of similar topics and different experiences of. So I have to give him applause for what he did. I actually thought a lot of that video was pretty educational, but I also am not going to take everything and go, yeah, this is such a really good video and everything. I'm just going to go, he made some good points, and I appreciate that he's at least trying, and that's all I'm trying to do as well. So to leave this off, I have a thought, and I'm just going to leave it here. So at the end of the day, what we need to keep in mind is the idea of race is used to separate and divide us so we can stay under control. It's a way of keeping us under the control of those in power, and by uniting, they will lose their power. So, I love you, my beautiful sweeties. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next video. If you guys would like to join in the conversation, please comment below, or if you have any ideas for future topics, you can always DM me on all of my social media accounts, or send me an email at wyona.am@gmail.com and my Tumblr blog, WyM3 blog. You can also check out all of my other YouTube videos, my music and books channel, Wyona A.M, and my WyM3 vlog, which is basically my home base and my vlog channel. And of course, if you haven't, also like and subscribe this channel, my Coffee with WyWy channel, where we will have more and more discussions like this one.